So I'm Matthew Peterson. I'm the marketing intern at Michigan Solar Solutions. This is our Q&A webinar. So we have questions that have been submitted, and we will be going over those. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the meeting chat, and I will be watching that throughout the meeting.
Okay, and my name's Mark Haggerty, President, Michigan Solar Solutions. We started the company back in 2007 and been doing nothing but solar since.
And my name is Ray Myers. I'm the residential sales manager here at Michigan Solar Solutions, and I'm really happy to be able to help be a part of this evening.
All right, so the first question we have submitted is, on a cloudy day, how much power do solar panels produce?
Well, I'll take that one. That is very hard to state because how can you quantify cloudiness? There's days where there's a slight mist over the sun to where it just impedes slightly the rays getting from the sun to the solar panels, all the way to where in the middle of the day it's pretty dark. So it will generate anywhere from almost full capacity to nothing, depending on the layer level and how many clouds and how thick the clouds are that are out there. Another way to look at it is it just needs light in order to make power. Everyone has a calculator that has a solar panel on it. Little solar panel calculator, you've had one. It's never needed the sun to operate, but they always operate because they work just off light. So even though on cloudy days, people believe you won't generate power, you will generate power.
Is there an app that you can put on your phone to check the power you're creating?
Yeah, there's actually multiple apps. In fact, it just depends on what type of system that you get. So each inverter company or battery company will typically have their own app. And actually, I've got one ready to see right here that we could take a look at. So this is one of the apps for one of the products that you can see here. And right in the beginning here, you can see what how much energy the home has used today, how much this person has had to import from the grid, how much power they've produced, how much of their battery went to power their home, how much of the solar went to charge the battery, and how much power they sent to the grid. So you could see today they've been able to utilize all of the power that they've produced on site. And then as far as the amount of energy usage, you can actually see it in multiple different ways over time. You could look at it on a daily basis or through the hours, or you can look at it on a weekly basis, monthly, lifetime, however you want. But the way it looks is you can turn on basically whatever you want to see here, and you can see that the blue produced is power. So you can see that the system kicked on, started to turn on right around 7:15 in the morning, 7:15, and it's still going right now, but it had its peak earlier today, right around 3 o'clock in the afternoon is when this thing was peaking, 3 to 4:30. But the other cool thing about this thing is not only can you see how much power that you're producing, you can see how much power you're consuming, whether you're exporting or importing from the grid. And down here, you can even see the state of the charge of the battery. So you can see this person started using their batteries and right around 3 a.m. and then drew off their batteries, and their batteries got down to as low as 75% or 74%, and then started getting recharged from the solar midday here just before 3 o'clock. And right now, they're even sitting at 92%. So this is just one look at one of the apps that you have. Some apps even have a feature where you can actually look at the individual performance of panels over time, and it'll even be signified by color code. So you can actually see if all your panels are functioning well or not.
Cool. Our third question here is, does solar ever save a homeowner money, taking into account all the costs of going solar and maintenance over time?
I could start off with that one. Two things are critical: acquisition cost of the solar and potential that the home or roof has for generating power. If you spend more than you should from one of these companies that knocks on the door and sign now or the price goes up tomorrow type of thing, and you don't do your due diligence, then you're likely going to pay too much. If you put it on a roof that has a lot of shading or not the best acclimation to sun, then you're not going to produce as much power. Now, if you get a competitive system, a good system installed by a good contractor, and it's put on a good roof that has a lot of solar potential, you'll absolutely make your money back. I've had it on my home for 10 years and I have not paid an electric bill in 10 years. So it's pretty hard not for it to make money when it's still in warranty period and it saved 120 electric bills.
I would like to add on that. That doesn't even count the fact that, the electric bill does go up every year. So you're saving more money every single year that you have zero electric bill. And the value of your home can also go up because of having the solar just intrinsically by itself. So it's as long as, like Mark was saying, you go with a reputable installer of the product, it's one of the only things you can actually do to your home that you're guaranteed to make money on. Where even if you're spending money on a different home remodel, it's not guaranteed to get you the same money it took you to do the remodel, like a kitchen or a bathroom or something like that.
Yeah, that's true. Another way to look at it is carport. If you put up a regular carport, is it going to return its investment? No, it won't. How could it? If you put solar panels on the top of your carport, will it return the investment? Yes, it will. It may, since the structure is more than just mounting on a roof, take several more years for the investment to be returned. But the point is, your investment will be returned. Now, to Ray's point about resale value, imagine you're looking for a new home, and you found two or three that you like. And one has a $300 a month electric bill, and one has a $20 a month electric bill. Is that going to help change your decision as to which home to get when you've already decided you like them both?
Yeah, absolutely. And then even through an investor's lens, one of the things, even if you're a good investor, that you have to worry about is taxation, right? And so one of the great things about solar is there's no long-term capital gains tax on your savings. It's all just pure savings.
Yeah, that's another good point. It's tax-free savings. If you were to take $20,000 and put it into a money market account, whatever, the money that is returned from it is taxable, it's income. But you take that $20,000 and you put solar on your roof, the money that it brings in, since it's really a cost offset, it's not necessarily making you money, it's saving you from having to pay money. So it comes in tax-free.
Yeah, and last but not least, I find this a very important point. We've been in business for just short of 20 years, and as the residential sales manager, if this didn't save you money, I probably wouldn't have a job.
Yeah. If it didn't save money, we wouldn't have it on all our buildings and homes.
Yep.
Our fourth question here is why is it up to the electric company to decide how much solar a person can have installed?
Well, I could start on this one too. It's kind of like the wolf guard in the hen house, right? Uh, they can tell us that we can only install a certain size system because they're incentivized to do so. Every panel you put up and every kilowatt hour of power that it generates for the 25, 35 years of its life expectancy is a kilowatt hour you're not buying from that utility company. The utility companies see our industry as the only competitors they've ever had in the life of their monopolies. So they have one of the largest lobbying agencies at the state, and they are very heavy-handed when it comes to promulgating new laws and uh, their interpretation of the law once implemented. They will fight. They'll have a 800 page response to the Michigan Public Service Commission when they're trying to institute something, fighting renewable tooth and nail. And then finally, when it comes through that they have to do something, their media publicists kick in and look at how great we are. Look at how green we are. Look at how much we care about you.
And there's also, since they don't have to make an investment in the infrastructure, it doesn't guarantee them a profit. Even though it actually helps the grid out immensely with distributed resources that in reality, when you're overproducing at your own home, go directly to your neighbor's house, and no extra infrastructure is needed to help balance that grid. But since there's no investment in that infrastructure, there's no increase in guaranteed profit.
Yeah, it's a great point. Up near China Township, they received the rights to build a $1 billion baseload natural gas generation facility. The moment that $1 billion project was approved, DTE was guaranteed over $100 million in profit from it because they're guaranteed over 10% return on capital expenditures. Now, our grid in Michigan peaks midday. We have 50% of our generation capacity is used for about 90 hours a year. 50% of generation capacity, 90 hours a year. Those 90 hours are these hot summer days when the heat of the infrastructure decreases the ability of the infrastructure to transfer energy. Plus, everybody's got their air conditioning on. So, what the utility companies want is near these on these days for the grid to near brownout so they can go to the MPSC and say, look, we need this large facility in Lapeer County because we're going to end up with brownouts and rolling blackouts because of not enough power generation during peak times. So the MPSC historically has had to approve it. Then they make money off of these capital expenditures. Solar, though, producing power midday at peak times really throws a wrench into that machinery. So they don't not only they not only don't like us because we are the only competitors they've had in their whole existence as a monopoly, but they also our industry and solar in general ruins their ability to install new plants to produce peak power.
And we've kind of answered this question a little bit in the last one, but we can elaborate a little bit more. Is it true the power companies no longer buy back surplus energy?
That was false. False. Not true. So I don't like to use the term buy back because when you buy and sell, there's always an exchange of dollars. It doesn't really give you an exchange of dollars. It gives you an exchange of credits. So the thing that changed is how that credit system works. It used to be for every kilowatt hour that you put on the grid, you would get a kilowatt hour's worth of credit, i.e. full retail value, as a bill credit on your bill. And these days, it's not a full bill credit. It's a partial bill. It's a partial, maybe wholesale amount credit per kilowatt hour you send to the grid. So it's still very viable, especially depending on how you have your system designed. Maybe you just design your system not to overproduce as much because if you're consuming it on site and you don't need to send it back, it's worth the full retail amount. So a lot of folks are just putting in maybe smaller systems, or a lot of folks even these days are, because the price of batteries has dropped, started adding batteries to their system and said, I'm just going to store the power in my house here on site and participate less with that system. Still being interconnected because eventually the battery does get full. As we've seen earlier, that one was at 90-something%. So when it gets to 100, the power still got to go somewhere. But a lot of folks are just choosing to use that battery as means for less interaction with the grid. And then on top of that, you also have backup power there waiting for you. And I guarantee you there's about 750,000 people in Michigan today who wish they had that at their house right now.
Another point with the sale of the power and the peak and off-peak rates that have been implemented recently and the way that DTE is now looking at the rates and the credits. And Ray knows this better than I, but correct me if I'm wrong, Ray, but if you produce the majority of your credits at peak time and they get credited at the peak rate, and then the majority of the power you buy is off peak at a much lower rate, could it potentially be a higher than a 1-for-1 credit where you're getting a little bit more than per kilowatt hour than you're spending?
No, it's not enough to do that, but it is enough where DTE does have some advantage there. In that case, as far as DTE versus consumers, customers, maybe DTE customers get a little bit more value per unit of solar they put up. In today's rate world, that might change in 5 years or whatever. But it's still without the cost of distribution. So it's just that increased
Sure.
cost of electricity. So
So
no
it's
matter what, you're not going to be able to,
it's
get a
one MPSC rate adjustment, not even a rate adjustment, but a policy adjustment for the valuation of peak power sent to the grid away from us getting a more than a 1-for-1 credit, which what you talked about earlier was net metering, a 1-for-1 credit. Now we have distributed generation, which is more of a monetary credit applied to the account that's applied to your bill at a later date. The monetary rate can very soon be more, and we could end up making money off of it once it's valued fairly. There was a time when DTE was charging 300% more for peak power than off peak. And all day long, when I was at work, my solar array at home was putting power on the grid. And then I'd come home at night and I'd pull power off the grid that was worth 1/3. Eventually, that will be valued correctly. In the last couple of years, I've seen a lot of changes towards that end.
Yeah. And the other thing that like we were talking about too is the batteries for the less interaction. So it's still a very, very good investment for anybody. And one thing's for sure, unless you're going to change your lifestyle majorly, you're going to have electric bill for the rest of your life. So why not just hook yourself up and your future self up and enjoy the savings for a longer period of time?
And our next question here is this person's system is about 9 years old, and they're wondering what the status of their net metering agreement with DTE is.
It's definitely getting close. Mark, I'll go ahead and let you cover this.
Sure. They being customers that have a net metering agreement with the utility company, get a 10-year grandfather from the date of what they call PTO, permission to operate, which was the last item of the interconnection process and turning it on. So 10 years from that date, they get net metering. Immediately after that, he's going to be transferred to the distributed generation, which we just went over in more detail. A distributed generation net metering, there's no valuation difference really between an east panel, a west panel, and a south panel facing. But with the distributed generation with peak and off peak, there is a advantage for people with sunny western facing roofs, because the western facing roofs, the solar panels on them will peak out during times when electricity is the most expensive.
And when people are looking at solar panels, what are some of the things that they should think about before deciding on a specific panel or company?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different things I would look at. One, it depends on who you are. For some people, it's aesthetics. So if you want something that might, in your mind, look nicer, maybe you want a more black on black architectural style panel that might blend in better with a roof than something that has a bunch of easy to see grid lines or a silver frame. Another thing is just overall space that you have to work with on your roof. So you might find that some panels have certain dimensions that allow you to, let's just say, for example, with panel A, you can only fit one row of panels on your roof because of its dimension, but the other panels, same wattage and same power, just a little bit different dimension. And so you can now fit two rows instead because of just the way it's laid out. So maybe that's what makes the difference. But, at the end of the day, I think for most people, it really just boils down to what fits your budget and then what's available in your given area.
Yeah,
And-
another item people used to be fixated on was the efficiency of a panel. I remember many customers stating that I hear these panels are only 23% efficient. There's these others that are 25% efficient. Well, in reality, if that was true, which it may have been, may not have been, depending on the configuration of the panel, but does it matter that the one panel takes 1% more of your roof to equal the same output? If the solar panels are covering 1.5% more of your roof than the other one, would you even notice that?
Yeah.
So way too much time was spent and fixated on the efficiency.
I think what's way more important than efficiency is the area you want to put solar panels unshaded. Because at the end of the day, any shade is going to have a much bigger impact on any modern solar panel that any reputable company would carry rather than the panel itself these days.
And when solar panels are shaded, does it impact the whole system or just an individual panel?
It depends on the type of system you have at the end of the day. Also, modern panel technology has come a long way. So even if you don't have the right type of system, let's say to ignore the effects of shade a little bit more, it's less impact than panels from 15 or 20 years ago would have had, just by themselves. But there are systems that are either have optimizers or microinverters behind every panel, where every panel is allowed to basically independently operate, where any shade or event that might touch or happen on one panel doesn't bring down the entire chain of panels. So it's a lot more distributed in what happens and how shading can affect it. But it still should be tried to, anytime you're putting a solar panel up, you should try to have it as in a sunniest place as possible at the end of the day.
Interesting. And I heard that we have at Michigan Solar Solutions have solar attic fans. What do those do, and are they worth installing?
Well, a solar power attic fan, I think most people have lived at one point in their lives in a home where there's a second story, and then those 90-degree summer days trying to go to sleep in a bedroom on the second story, because it's always hotter than the lower one, is very, very uncomfortable. If you find yourself in one of those homes where the second story is a lot hotter than the lower level, then a solar power attic fan could help dramatically. And what it would do is it will turn on when the sun comes up in the morning. As the sun hits the panel, it'll start turning, it'll start pulling air from the attic. And as the sun gets higher in the sky, it'll start turning faster and faster. And at midday, when the sun is heating up your attic, some attics could be 180 degrees if they're not ventilated correctly. 180 degrees. Well, that's sitting there heating up your ceiling, heating up the bedrooms. You clear this hottest air out of there, and you're going to notice the difference. So what are you going to notice? Well, a little bit easier to go to sleep, a little bit more welcoming environment. Also, decrease in load on your air conditioning and decrease in your electric bill, because these things don't require any plug. They're solar power.
I would imagine it's also going to impact the life of your roof at least a little bit, and maybe just the building structure itself.
Yeah, we've seen those roofs where the shingles are curling, the corners are all curling up. Those are typically attics that have overheated, and you're frying those shingles. So if you have a solar power attic fan and you have the ability to pump this hot air out, when I used to look at customers' electric bills, we'd get a graph of the 13 most recent months of usage. So we'd have over a year worth of usage. And customers that had a very high summer usage in relationship to other customers with comparable size homes, I would notice one of two things. Either they had a swimming pool or they had a air conditioning issue with an upstairs, like I just mentioned. It's a pretty significant difference in electrical usage through the year that these things can really help on.
And we mentioned earlier microinverters. What's the role of those, and are they different from a regular inverter?
So in the way I look at it these days, it seems like there are basically three types of inverters. You have your microinverter, you have a string inverter, and then you have a hybrid inverter. And the difference between the three, so a microinverter, there's one inverter per panel. So it gives you, I keep saying the word distributed, but it really is a distributed architecture throughout the project that you're putting up, so that every single panel has its own power creation source. So the nice thing about that is you have some redundancy in the system, where if you do have one item fail within it, the whole system doesn't go down. If you have 40 panels, one microinverter fails, you still have 39 microinverters outputting power. And then you also have the ability to decrease the events or the effects of shading, like we had talked about earlier, pretty easily with that. There's also string systems, which can be with or without optimization. So they could have the product built right into where we can help and deal with the shade or not. And there's just one power creation unit there that's going to be inverting the panel, the DC power to AC power. And if that unit fails, then the whole system goes down. So you lose that distributed architecture that you have with the microinverters, but they're typically a less expensive system to put up. And then you also have a hybrid inverter, which is kind of like a string inverter, but on steroids, because a hybrid inverter allows you to do everything that you could do with a string inverter. Plus, it allows you to control a battery. It might have a generator, plugin capabilities for it, or other AC product plugins where you could even do biodigesters, little windmills, whatever, where you can kind of put everything together into one box and send the power from one place, which makes for wiring things and controlling things a lot easier, because then it all typically runs through one app, like we were talking about earlier on in the questions. So those are really the three main types, and the differences as I see them today.
What happens to solar power during like a power outage?
Well, I guess I'll take this one. The inverter needs a traditional inverter, whether it's a string or a microinverter, needs to see the grid to operate. It needs to be able to, our grid is AC, alternating current. 60 times every second, the waveform goes up and down. Well, if we're producing power and we have to sync with the grid, we need to make sure that they sync together. So the inverter needs the grid as a reference in order to know how to generate power. So a traditional type system, the moment the grid goes down, within a millisecond, your system becomes inoperable. The moment the grid comes back up, it will start a 300-second or 5-minute countdown to align itself with the grid and then go live with the grid once again. Then there's the hybrid inverter, like Ray mentioned, and we're finding a lot more of our sales going that way because of the instability of the grid, geopolitical instabilities, people's concern for resilience and power through the tribulations they might have to deal with. The hybrid inverters we're selling more of. Now, the way this works is it runs just like I just stated, but the moment the grid goes down, it is a 60 hertz replicator inside of it that turns on your off-grid inverter and allows the battery power to go through the inverter, replicate a 60 hertz AC waveform, and then feed your loads. So it's so instantaneous. It's like a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply, that you won't even see your computer flicker. You will find out when you get a notification on your phone that your power's out and your battery is now servicing your loads. So with this, the sun will then recharge the battery through the solar panels. If you hit a point where your loads are more than the battery and the solar can substantiate or can run, then these systems now can turn your generator on. And then your generator will turn on, stabilize, and then the load will switch to the generator and continue your loads with the extra power recharging your battery along with the sun. So these are what we're calling microgrids. And microgrids have been around for a long time, but they're starting to finally, the technology has hit the point where it's now capable for the average person to think about getting one, and for some of us to actually get one.
And we've kind of mentioned this a couple times throughout so far, but why would someone need a battery for their solar system? How does it benefit them?
Well, we've touched on it a couple times before, but the two main benefits are backup power and extra savings. So, and it's mainly backup power. The extra savings is just kind of a cherry on top, unless you just really don't like the utility, and then that's your reason you're using it, is to get away from them more often. But the biggest part is the backup power, and it's just to have power on days like today where we have 750,000 people without power. I mean, that's really annoying to have to deal with, or in some cases, it's not even safe. There are certain families that are going to be relying on, actual medical equipment to be able to run, or to be able to do, stay asleep or whatever the case might be. And without the power, those things just can't happen. So up until these type of solutions have come along, I mean, the best solution for this was a really annoying generator that had to run 24 hours a day until the power was fixed. And so with the microgrid solution, even like we were talking about before, the generator can kick off and only run for a few hours to recharge the battery. So it depends on what type of setup you have as far what it is. But as far as the two main uses, those are it: to be less reliant on the grid, to be just more self-sufficient, and to have backup power for whatever you need it for at the end of the day. I guess the main point here, I want to make, is not all backup power is created equal. So different batteries and different inverters are capable of different things, and you want to make sure you're talking to a reputable solar company if that's something you're looking at, because it's probably the easiest thing in solar to get wrong if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, and they aren't mutually exclusive, meaning that you can program it for two separate things at the same time. You can have self-consumption and resilience. So you have your battery programmed so that it acts as the grid, taking your extra power, feeding it back to the home throughout the day. And then if the power goes out, you'll have a reserve capacity to be there to run your loads. And you can set that red line. You can have 10% of it for self-consumption, 90%, 100% for self-consumption, whatever you want to set it with. And then the remainder will be available if the power goes out. Another thing for self-consumption is you can program to where when you're at peak demand, your battery, your self-consumption is only being applied during peak times. So you aren't buying the highest cost energy, and they call that rate arbitrage. So you're buying low, selling high, creating low, selling high, basically.
Yep.
And to Ray's point earlier, I don't like using the term sell because it typically means that they're buying it. But what you're really doing is offsetting your purchases to where you're not purchasing any of the highest priced power.
Right. Or if you want to look at it the other way, most people have a $150,000 debt that they didn't even know they signed up for. Zero paperwork involved. And that's just what it's going to cost to pay the average electric bill over the next 25 to 30 years.
And are there different types of solar batteries? And if so, what are they?
There are different types of batteries, different chemistries, and different types of ideas within batteries. So there are some people that make batteries that have inverters in them. So you don't need solar even to have a battery. You could just run the battery by itself, charge it from the grid, and have it to discharge during an outage event. You have other batteries that have that microgrid architecture built right into the battery. So it doesn't have a full inverter in it, has many microinverters. So if one breaks, not the whole battery breaks, right? You can still get power out of the thing. They have other batteries that need to be used with a hybrid inverter, like we were talking about earlier, and the inverter works to power both the battery and the solar at the same time. Different chemistries within the battery as well. They've got some that are a little bit more stable and some that are extremely stable. So, and it just, some with more fire suppression, some with less, some with cooling systems that are active, some with passive, so with and without fans. So there are lots of different types of batteries out there. And again, it just boils down to what's available in your area, what makes most sense for what you're trying to do. You absolutely if there's many types of batteries, there's many tools out there. You don't want to try to use the hammer to put in the screw, but again, just make sure you're using a reputable solar company or do plenty of research to make sure that you're getting the right setup for you. Both you want to have the same amount or the right amount of storage as far as capacity, so amount of kilowatt hours or energy to make it through a time of an event, but you also want to have the amount of power or kilowatts available at any given time, because you might have a well, a sump pump, and your electric oven all turn on at the same time because it's dinner and that's just what happened. So you just want to be able to make sure that whatever you have, you're prepared for it to work the way you want it to work.
And how long do solar batteries typically last? How long is the warranty on them?
The average warranty on a battery these days is going to be right around 10 years. Some have a little bit more, some have a little bit less. And for most lithium ion technology, and that's really all we've been referring to as far as batteries tonight. There's even other types of batteries, lead acid batteries and things of that nature that you can use as well. But lithium ion is basically mostly what we use. And those are going to have somewhere between a 15 and 20 year lifespan, depending on how it's used, how it's cycled, what kind of temperature it's stored in, and how much power it's demanding and pulling, charging, discharging. But somewhere is between a 15 and 20 year life cycle before it's going to need to be replaced or updated.
Okay. And how would someone determine the right battery capacity for their home?
Well, I guess it depends again. It depends on what you want to do, right? So the name of the game is for capacity is how many kilowatt hours do I need? So really, you just got to figure out what items do you want to run in your house. You know, what's critical for you. If you want your whole home to run, then you just look at your electric bill and see how many kilowatt hours have I used, divide it by 30, and you got generally how many used per day. And then you just figure out how many days you want. You want 1, 2, or 3 days, and then times that out and figure out what you know, just do the math on it. But if you're not doing that, because most people I don't really encourage to do that, because it's just cheaper to power something, maybe more essential loads during the home when the power is out, is to just go around and figure out what the wattage of the items are that you want to power and how often you run it. And that will give you if you just times the wattage by the hours, that will give you the number in kilowatt or in watt hours. And then you just take that and divide it by 1,000 to get your kilowatt hours. And that will tell you how big your battery storage should be, because all of these things will have a power rating in watts or kilowatts, and all of them will have a rating as far as capacity or energy storage in kilowatt hours. But that's how I would advise to go about it. If you don't want to do it all by hand out there are also calculators on the internet that allow you to just click buttons and it will get you in the right area, but it's never going to be exact to the right specifications of the exact equipment you have in your home.
Sure. Another route is a SPAN intelligent home panel. We've recently put them in both of our office buildings. And with these, they tell what every circuit is drawing. And you can program in them that during a grid fail, it can shut off whatever circuits that you program in that you want shut off. So immediately when the power goes down, it shuts off non-critical loads, and it will constantly give you a toggle as to how many hours and how many minutes worth of reserve capacity you have currently with the loads you're running at the rate that you're running them with the storage capacity that you have. Now, on top of that, there's also the solar generation, which is going to increase that time span, so it's worst case scenario. You also have the ability to shed more loads to increase that time span. But getting a home intelligent panel is critical for somebody that wants long-term off-grid survival with a microgrid system in order to get the granularity of consumption, usage, and storage that you would want.
Yeah, beyond that, it's just cool to have a virtual circuit board on your phone that you can turn things on and off even at a distance if you're at home. And it can also notice if you have a weird spike of energy that you don't normally have, that maybe it's sensing that a product in your home is going bad, maybe a motor's starting to fail and it's taking more power to start, and you can get it replaced prior to you coming home and having a bad day because it has already failed. So it's really cool in that way as well.
Yep.
And while we're on the topic of microgrids, we've kind of mentioned them a little bit, but how do they differ from a traditional solar panel system?
Well, a solar panel system, you have one means of power generation, the solar panels. A grid tie system, you have the solar panels and the grid, but you really have no backup capability. In a microgrid, you have multiple means of power generation along with a storage ability. You have built-in redundancies. So the SPAN panel helps you control your usage. The solar generates it. The grid is available when it's up and running, and your generator is available just in case there's equipment failure and or a time when your loads exceeded your capacity or your ability to run them. So the microgrid is much more of a holistic ecosystem in of itself, and a solar array is just a part of it.
Awesome. That is all of the questions that we have. Thank you both for coming, and everybody else who joined the webinar.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Have a great night.